Hey everybody, welcome back to the Tales of the Pod podcast. My name is Michaela, I'm your host.
Hi guys, it's me, Nick.
And this week we are going to be discussing the new horror movie that came out, The First Omen. Which I think is so badass, it came out Easter weekend.
Yeah, and it's basically like a prequel to the original Omen, right?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a direct prequel to the Omen. Like it takes place right before the Omen, I would say.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. It leads up to the whole beginning scene, really, of the Omen.
Yeah, which it does really well. Like, going into it, you're like, oh god, another like remake of a movie, like it's just a cash grab or whatever. But I would say it does a really, really good job of not being like a typical remake or
or prequel or whatever.
Or spin-off or whatever you want to call it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when they use names like The Omen or The Exorcist or whatever, it's kind of just a cash grab.
Yeah, no, I agree. But no, this one definitely, they did a very good job with this one.
Yeah, so people are even saying that this is the best horror movie of the year.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And it definitely gives me like vibes of the Immaculate movie that we saw too.
Yeah, it's definitely...
The church is doing some shady shit again, so...
Yeah, it's definitely very similar to Immaculate. I even saw this comment online, and it says, 2 genre films reveal supernatural Catholic horror in this economy.
Yeah. I know, it'd be like a good double feature, honestly, these movies. Like, if theaters were to do that as like a double feature flick, because, I mean, they both are very similar and...
very similar themes, too.
Yeah, just like with the church and how messed up they are.
Yeah, and like Rosemary's Baby-esque, I would say, for both.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's crazy that they came out pretty much back to back. But yeah, you're right, it would be a good double feature for sure.
I think that'd be a good move for the theaters, get people in there.
So we're going to discuss the whole movie, essentially. So there are spoilers in this. I would suggest going to see it if you haven't yet. It's been out for a little bit now, so hopefully you have seen it. Right. But we're just going to go over it quick and then give our opinion on it. And yeah. So essentially the movie starts out and it's set in Rome in 1971. And our main character that we have is a nun. Her name is Margaret. And she arrives at some, what's it called, Visaretti orphanage. So essentially it's an orphanage for all these like young girls, and the nuns are the caretakers there, essentially.
Yeah, essentially it's like an orphanage, typical like Catholic orphanage type setup.
She meets a cardinal, Father Gabriel. She meets a couple sisters.
Yes.
And her roommate that she has is also kind of like newer to... I was going to say newer to nunnery.
Newer to nunnery. I guess.
Yeah. So she's living with her roommate as well in Rome, and she's going to become a nun as well.
Yeah.
So it kind of starts out where it's like, it's not really super creepy at first. Like, there's this orphanage. There's this one young girl there, Carlita.
Yes.
And they kind of allude to the fact that Carlita is like a troubled child, and, she can't play with others. She's always locked away in this room.
Yeah.
And Margaret kind of especially bonds with her because she says when she was younger that she had troubles connecting with others too. When she was in an orphanage, she didn't know her parents.
Yeah.
So she was placed in an orphanage and she had a hard time connecting with others, and she was always labeled as the bad child.
Right.
So we kind of find that out at first, and you see this young girl, Carlita, just like unfairly put in this room and like
she says like
locked away.
But their explanation is like she's like the troubled one, but like you come to find out that she's actually like having
normal
like visions and stuff like that, and that's what the Margaret also had the same problem when she was a young kid. She thought like she was seeing stuff that wasn't there, and
so they lock Carlita away saying she's crazy, she's biting other kids and all that stuff, but we never really, we're assuming that's not true given the rest of the movie, but
sure,
at first you're like, okay, that's weird,
right?
And so she's kind of getting settled in this orphanage, and then it was the night before I think they take their oath or whatever it is to become like a full-on nun. Her roommate, I think her name was Luz. She invites Margaret to a disco.
Yeah.
And it's like a wild. She gets super, super messed up. I don't know if she takes any drugs, but she drinks a ton.
Yeah.
She starts kind of dancing with this guy and starting to let go a little bit, and then she blacks out.
Yep.
And she wakes up in the morning and...
Yeah, she's covered in sweat, too.
She's covered in sweat. Yeah. She has kind of like a weird nightmare. Like, there's like a bug crawling on her when she wakes up. Like, kind of just like weird in and out sleeping. Yes. But she pretty much passes out.
Yep.
And in the beginning, she tries to talk to her roommate for comfort, which, like, sis, we've all been there. We've all been knocked out, and we're like, okay, what happened to me last night? Like... The roommate's not giving her anything. She's just like, oh yeah, no, you weren't like too bad.
Yeah, she was like kind of just really alluding at the fact, or evading the fact, I mean.
Definitely very evasive and just like laughing and like an inside joke about it.
Yeah.
So Margaret's super upset. She goes to the chapel at the orphanage and just starts praying relentlessly because she's like, what did I do?
Yeah.
Did I break one of my vows? Did I do something with this guy? Like, I don't know what happened. I don't remember anything.
And just a side note, too, Margaret's very, like, Orthodox Christian. Like, very does not, like, dresses, like, doesn't show any, like, ankle or anything like that. Like, very, very Orthodox. Like, getting ready, basically, practicing being a nun before she's officially being a nun, essentially.
Yep.
So, this was a big, like, freak out for her, not remembering what happened and dancing in a club with some guy, you know.
Yeah, no, it was definitely very weird. And,
Excuse me.
So she starts to kind of bond with this Carlita a little bit more, and we kind of see that Carlita's normal. Like, she's a normal kid.
Yeah.
She's actually quite sweet.
Yeah, she's a very, actually, nice girl, yeah.
Yeah, and, like, one of the priests there warns Margaret and says that evil things will start happening around Carlita because she's an evil little girl.
Yeah, no, so that's the parallel to the first Omen. So I just want to make that parallel. So in the first Omen, the one with Gregory Peck in 1960s or 1976.
The original, not the first.
Yeah, the original Omen. I'm sorry. Yeah, because this is called the first Omen. So the priest that comes and visits Gregory Peck and is like giving him all the warning signs and stuff like that, and like being kind of like weird to him. That's this priest coming to her first because. He's seen what happened, I guess, what the church did.
Yes.
And he's basically trying to warn her about Carlita.
Yeah, he's basically gone rogue.
Yeah, he's like a separate sect of the church that's not involved with the weird stuff they're doing.
Yeah, he actually said he's into this like occult conspiracy, basically, and he shows her a photograph of this baby, and it says Sienna on the back, and they're like, who the hell is Sienna? Yeah. But he basically starts having this huge conspiracy about the church, about what they're doing.
And he's telling Margaret this, and she's like, dude, you're crazy. Like, you know, it's basically the same kind of thing Gregory Peck was saying. Like, no, you're crazy. She's just a child. Like, of course, she's not going to be, you know, evil or whatever.
Yeah.
So she kind of just brushes that off, and then...
And then Margaret sees Carlita. She shows another sister a drawing of a pregnant woman being restrained. Mm-hmm. And it's creepy because she shows this one nun, and this one nun is, like, creepy as hell. Yeah. And she draws, like, a baby inside the belly and says, like, oh, look, it's a boy. And Margaret's like, I don't think that's appropriate, sister. Yeah. And she stands up, she kisses Margaret on the lips. Yeah. And then she walks away. And then you get, like, the iconic... shout out to the original Omen. Yes. She crawls up on the roof and she basically says, it was all for you. Like, you know, in the original when they said it's all for you, Damien. Yes. She says it's all for you, but this one's a little more intense because she hangs herself, drops down like they do, you know, at the birthday party in the Omen. Yeah. But then she catches on fire.
Yeah, she lights herself on fire before she jumps, actually. Yep. And it's the same kind of like, but, you know, this is at a nunnery and everyone... you know, goes crazy, you know, like, all the nuns are grabbing the kids and pulling them away and everything, and... Oh, yeah, there's full-on children seeing this. Yeah, it was pretty insane. Yeah, I will say, it was pretty disturbing. Like, I've seen a lot in horror movies, but that was definitely pretty disturbing. Yeah, very well shot, definitely. Yeah, that's the, that's probably one of the most iconic scenes in film history, honestly.
I agree, and I'm glad
in the Omen.
I'm glad that they did that little like shout out.
Yeah, kind of bringing it back. I guess.
Yeah, and like before the nun hung herself, she was kind of getting like obsessed with Carlita. Like she was sitting next to her. She was whispering in her ear and stuff, and Margaret is kind of protective over Carlita at this point, so she's like, what was she saying to you? Like, why is she sitting next to you? Yes. And then you're kind of thinking, you're watching this, and you're like, what the hell's up with Carlita? Like, what is happening here?
Because, like, she's not really doing anything, like, Damien-like, you know?
No, she's not at all.
You know, she's literally just being a child at this point, you know?
So they basically, you know, they move all the kids out of the way, and at that point, Margaret goes back to Father Brennan and is like, okay, I believe you. Yes. Like, something's happening here.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's where she's like, okay, maybe, there is something more to this. Yes. Yeah.
And then Father Brennan, certainly not doctor. He explains that radicals within the church, desperate to regain power again against the rise of secularism, seek to bring about the Antichrist, to create fear and basically drive people back to church.
Yeah, it's really messed up concept.
It's super messed up. It's like, you're basically going to use a scare tactic to force people into your religion.
Yeah, just for the sake of just being in the religion.
Just to get rid of... Because this is like it starts out in the movie, too, and like there's a time period where they go into like the town of Rome, and there's all these like left-wing protesters. Like, this is a high tension time.
Yeah, I mean, this
people
is
are going against the church.
Yes. Yeah, 1970 Italy. There's like with the Contras and stuff like that's happening, and you know, there's a bunch of stuff going on in the world, and
people are questioning things. I would say that's like the 60s, 70s. People started to question, like, you know, why are we going to church every week? What are we believing in? What is the church doing? I think the sexual assault happening in the church was kind of coming to light as well.
Yeah, it's something that's starting to be brought more toward the light and everything. And
so, I mean, off the bat, this theory sounds batshit crazy. I would be like, what? They're bringing upon the Antichrist?
Well, that's what I mean. I think that's where she's like, you're crazy. Like, this is no way. That's like, the church would never do that. And he's like, no, believe me, they are doing it and everything. And
and even during the field trip they have where, like, the left-wing protests break out, Margaret starts to have all these, like, crazy hallucinations. Like, she's, like, holding her head and she's seeing all this stuff. She sees, like, a creature thing in the crowd looking at her.
Yeah.
And one of the main nuns is just, like, staring at her, and you're like, oh, no. Like, she thinks she's crazy now.
Yeah.
And we're all, like, on Margaret's side watching this. We're like, no, she's not crazy. Yeah. She's just, like, had some childhood trauma. Like, who knows what she went through at the orphanage, whatever.
Right.
And this one nun's looking at her, like, sus. Like, I don't know about all that.
Yeah. So, yeah, then after, I guess, basically that nun hangs herself, they kind of, I don't know, they guess kind of just go about, like, the regular routine. I mean, nothing really...
Well, after they have that field trip, sorry. After they have that field trip where Margaret has, like, the demonic hallucinations, the nun that...
when they go to the art museum?
Yeah. The nun that was looking at her, like, when she was having her hallucinations was like, you're crazy. And then we're the audience kind of being like, is that why she was locked away as a child? Did she have these hallucinations all the time as a child? That's why she was locked away and labeled as the bad child, like similar to Carlita.
I think that's
so that's kind of what we're thinking. So
yeah,
her name is Sister Silva. She postponed Margaret's vows to become like an official nun or whatever, and says, you know, I think you should take some time to work on your mental health. I don't think you're fit, like you're right for this at this time. And she basically, most importantly, tells her to distance herself from Carlita.
Yeah.
So now Margaret's like, what the hell?
Yeah, she's like, stay away from Carlita.
Yeah. She's like, what's going on with Carlita? And she calls the nun right out and she like yells at her. I forget what she says, but she's like, something's going on and it's your fault and blah, blah, blah. And the nun's immediately like, oh, you just confirmed all my suspicions. Like, get out.
Yeah, she basically freaks out on the Mother Superior, and she basically pays for it.
And then later on, Margaret sneaks into the same nun's office, Sister Silva, and she has like this painting on the wall of like
it's like an old
angels.
Yeah, it's like a mural. It's like the whole wall is this mural.
And she kind of like pushes it in, and it's a fake wall, and it opens up, and it goes down this creepy ass staircase, which of course it does.
Yeah.
And there's this like underground chamber with a bunch of subject files, and they're all labeled Sienna, which is the same picture that Father Brennan had showed her in the beginning with a baby nicknamed Sienna.
Yeah.
So there's all these different files named Sienna, and they're all these like mutant-looking babies.
Right.
Like all these messed up looking,
super deformed. Like, you know, they had legs growing out of their heads.
It reminded me of
like out of their feet.
Hills Have Eyes, when they show like the radioactive people after the radiation. That's kind of what it showed. It reminded me
like
of.
Riddled with tumors and
disfigured babies, but every single one of them has a birthmark, and the birthmark is 3 6s.
Yep, 666.
Like all intertwined.
Yeah.
Which, if you don't know, I mean, obviously 666 is like the satanic, quote unquote, like mark of the beast.
Yep. That was the thing in the original Omen as well.
Yep. And out of all these files, one of them is Carlita, which she seems to be the only, I guess, like, normal one or survivor of it, initially, when you're looking at this.
Right. Yeah, she's, like, because they all basically lived for about same kind of thing with, like, Immaculate. They lived for a week's time or something, and then they died.
And Margaret remembers that at one point when Carlita was being like tied down to the bed, she was screaming. She was like, ah! And at the top of her mouth, she had the 666 on her mouth.
So now she totally believes Father Brennan.
Yes, now she's like, oh shit.
She's like, okay, confirmed. I'm going to help him, you know, solve this basically.
So she grabs all these files, and with the help of another priest there, Father Gabriel, she grabs all the files and they go to Father Brennan's place.
Yes.
They examine the files, and they discover that another baby besides Carlita had survived.
Right.
Which, when they're talking about this, they're like, okay, essentially, they're using these babies to be like the next Antichrist, right? Like, they're impregnating women.
Yes.
With the devil, literally.
Yeah, so the whole thing, I think Father Brennan touches on it, I think, at this point, too. So basically what the church was doing was getting these women to have intercourse with this jackal, and that's like part of like the whole theory behind the Antichrist. The father's a jackal, basically, and the mother's an earth woman, and that's how the Antichrist will be born. So basically, they have this jackal thing in the basement of this orphanage.
Yeah, just hanging out.
Like, yeah, and it's like it's basically a demon or the devil, you know, whatever you want to call it. And so they have to, you know, have sex with these women and impregnate them, and that's where all these deformed child came from.
Because obviously it's not human, so it's not going to be like a typical.
Yes, it's not
child.
A human. Yeah. So
and you're watching this, and they're going through, and they're realizing that's what they're doing. But Margaret says, you know, Carlita's just a young girl. She's like 12, 14 years old. Like, there's no way they could use her. There's no way she can carry a baby, and they can't. There's no way.
Well, she is one of the babies. That's the thing.
I know, but she says that. She thinks, initially they think that they're going to use Carlita to do this again.
Yeah, they are.
That's what Father Brennan is
they are,
saying.
Yeah, you're right.
And then basically they find out that another baby has survived. And Margaret's looking at this picture of the baby that we saw in the beginning that's labeled Sienna. And she's looking at it, and it has the nun from the orphanage she's working at now, the bishop from the orphanage she's looking at now, and they're all holding this baby.
Yeah.
And she just has some kind of like epiphany, and she's like, oh shit, that's me. And she feels on her scalp for the mark, and she has the mark on the back of her head.
Yeah, they look at her, because I don't know how exactly she put 2 and 2 together, because I guess it was the date on the picture would have been like, it was like 1958, it was the date, and so that would put her right about this age, and she was an orphan too.
So she has no idea really what happened before she was adopted.
Yeah, so I guess, so she must have just put 2 and 2 together. And
it doesn't really elaborate on that, because you're watching it and you're kind of like, how did you know? Unless she just like felt the mark, like something supernatural as she was looking at the picture, she had some kind of connection and felt the mark.
Yeah, that's the only thing. I mean, in the movie, it probably, like, there's maybe some, like, flashbacks or something. But...
Yeah, but then she shows Father Brennan, and he looks at the mark, too, and they're all just kind of, like, appalled. They're like, oh, my God. So she kind of has a flashback at that point, and she kind of remembers that night when she went to the disco with her quote-unquote friend, that when she passed out, that was the night that they did the satanic ritual and impregnated her with the devil's spawn, essentially, in an attempt to conceive the Antichrist.
Yeah, and another thing, just so there's a little confusion here, because like both Margaret and Sienna are spawns of this beast, but the beast needs to also recreate with its spawn, basically. Yeah. So the beast has to. It's basically like incest. Yeah. That's the whole point of it. Is there's like some sort of weird form of incest going on with a jackal.
Yeah, that was kind of confusing to me too, because I'm like, okay, so Carlita was they're both, I guess, like
they're both
spawns, but then you would have to.
Because it needs to be a boy, and that's what they're trying to get is a boy. It has to be a boy to be the Antichrist. And I don't know really why. It's just, I guess the church wants a boy.
It's just misogyny.
Yeah.
Honestly.
I don't know why it can't be a woman, but...
It's just the church and its misogyny.
Yeah, so that's that part of the...
Yeah, I don't know. I thought that was interesting, too, because I was like, Carlita, that makes more sense now that you have to like do it with the spawn to... create something that makes more sense.
Yeah, to make it more pure, I don't know. It's got to be pure, I guess.
So, immediately, Margaret's like, abortion, get it out of me.
Yeah.
Like, something's inside me now, get it out. So, Father Brennan was like, yeah, I know a doctor, they'll do it, whatever. So they're driving on their way to this doctor, and of course, out of nowhere, a car comes, hits them.
Yes.
And, kills one of the priests, and then it like pretty much puts Father Brennan in like a coma.
Yeah.
And Margaret has like an absolute meltdown because they crash, and she stands up, and she's right outside of a church.
Yeah.
And she just has a meltdown, probably because she's having contractions too, but she just has a complete meltdown.
It was super weird too, because she immediately just started getting pregnant symptoms. Like after she found out and realized what had happened, her belly just like grew, and she started like twitching and like acting,
bleeding. Yeah.
Yeah, super like being like 9 months pregnant and like literally a matter of like seconds.
Yes. And then like these mysterious men come up, and they kind of take her away, and next thing you know, she wakes up and she's just strapped down to a hospital bed.
Yeah. And
the room was filled with most of the people from the orphanage, I would say. Like her supposed friend, her roommate was in there. The main nun was in there. The main father that was Cardinal. That's Cardinal Lawrence. He was in there. Which he's known her since her first orphanage. Like, he used to go see her at her first orphanage when she was quote-unquote troubled.
Yeah, so that kind of ties it full circle now. How I guess she might have known that. Yeah, because now she's like, wait a minute, maybe that's how, she put 2 and 2 together, that I'm part of this experiment too.
And he's like the head of it all. Like, he's, like, organizing all of it. Yeah. And so she starts to give birth, and they find out that it's twins. There's 2 of them. So she gives birth to a little girl and a little boy. And they come out looking pretty normal. Like, relatively normal. Yeah. And immediately, all the people in, like, the cloaks and everything, typical cult look, they take the boy away, and they're showing him to everybody, and they just leave the girl there crying, which is a pretty sad scene, because she's tied down in the bed, and she's like, can someone help, like, the baby, like, she's crying, somebody help my daughter. Yep. And even though she has, like, this attachment, because it's literally the Antichrist, right, it's still a little baby there. Nobody is paying attention because she's a girl.
Right. Oh, I think that, they're more concerned because it's finally
a boy.
Yeah, it's finally the boy now, you know.
So pretty much they would just leave her to die, because, I mean, when a baby's born, they have to be warmed up. They can't just be laying there like that. Yeah. Yeah, so like, they're kind of, like, all in awe about it. They're all like, thank you so much. They're even like apologizing to Margaret and everything. Yeah, they're like, we're so sorry, you did great.
Yeah, you'll learn to love him and stuff. Like, this is all for the betterment of the church and the betterment of the world. Like, just completely, like, bullshitting her, you know. And she's like, well, let me hold him. He is my son.
That was smart.
And then she was able to, like, she got a hold of the baby, and then she stabbed the cardinal with, like, I don't know, a scalpel or something right in the neck, and he immediately dies, and they're all freaking out, all the cult people, and she ends up getting the baby back. I don't know how she ends up getting it. I think her roommate attacks her.
Yeah, comes up and takes the baby, and they're basically, like, we don't care about you, we really just want this baby. Right. And as they're walking away, they're kind of like, burn it all to the ground.
Yeah, like hide the evidence, essentially.
And then they're like, and everybody else that's in there, like, burn them to the ground. Right. So the place starts to catch on fire. We still have the baby. We have Margaret. And then Carlita comes down, and she's trying to save Margaret, because she's like, you were so kind to me, essentially. Like, I'm trying to help her.
She saved her, basically.
She does,
she pulls her out. And
you see, like, the devil-looking creature in the background, which is pretty
you finally see the jackal that is mating with these women to produce these spawns and everything, and it's pretty. You don't really catch a full picture of him, but there's like an outline glimpse of him, because they have him behind like this gate robe thing. I don't know.
He's like chained to something.
Yeah, he's like chained up, and he's like behind this robe. I don't know. It's kind of.
It reminded me. This is like completely like not where it should have been, but it reminded me of like Donkey Kong, the way he was like jumping. He was like, oh. That's what it reminded me of. Like, if Donkey Kong was, like, tied up, that's kind of what it reminded me of.
That is funny.
But anyway, so the place is burning down to the ground, and Margaret, plot twist, actually grabs the girl baby, the female baby. Yeah. And carries her with her. Yep. And, her and Carlita and the baby kind of run off, and they end up actually making it a few years. Yeah. And
I don't know where exactly they end up. I think they're in the United States at this point.
I think it was Canada, it said.
Canada? Okay.
Yeah. It looked like Canada. It was like pretty desolate and snowy.
Sure.
But they're like in the middle of like nowhere, essentially, and the baby's probably 5 years old at this point. And
Carlita's like a teenage, like, she's probably like 18 now, I'd say.
So it's Margaret, Carlita, and the baby, and they're all living together. And the baby looks completely normal. You would never know that her dad is literally the devil. Yep. And Father Brennan comes and knocks on her door and was like, I just want to let you know that they know you've survived and they're coming to kill you, basically. And she's like, I just want to be left alone or whatever. And she cranks up a shotgun and aims it at him and is like, if you don't get off my property, I'm going to kill you, basically. Yeah. And he's like, okay, I'll leave. And he walks away a couple feet, and in a scene that's so dramatic, he walks away and says, well, they've named the son. And she's just like, I don't give a fuck. And he's like, his name is Damien. Yeah. And then it's like, dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, basically. And it's like, and then it relates to, he was just adopted by the diplomat, or what was he, the ambassador to Italy from the United States. So
yes. And
hence the movie, The Omen. So it's the prequel. That's how Damien came to be adopted, essentially. Yes. Born and adopted.
And they even show, at one point, they show a picture of the parents from The Omen, and they're like, it's going to go to this family, and...
Yeah, they, like, already have it predetermined who it's going to go to and everything like that. So they've been waiting for this to happen for years, and...
They say that, these parents are going to suffer a tragedy, like a miscarriage, essentially, and then they're going to be blessed with Damien, and they're going to raise the literal Antichrist. Yeah. Which I would be pissed.
Yeah, so that's kind of cool how they tied that all together, and like they even show a picture like you were saying of Gregory Peck, and like being the father of Damien in the original Omen, and saying that's who he's going to go to and everything. And there's some other ties too, like the orphanage when they burn it down, and the first Omen or the original Omen, when he's going to find out like where his son came from, they come, they go to Rome and they find the building had burned down. Mm-hmm. There's like that one doctor left or priest or whatever that's like basically a vegetable now and doesn't talk. Yeah. So there's a lot of like tying together and like, oh, okay, yeah, I remember that from the original one. Like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I can see why that all ties together. And
yeah, I think they did a good job of not really leaving any like plot holes between the two movies. I think if they're going to do a prequel, especially for such an iconic movie.
Oh, and being, I mean, God, almost 50 years ago that movie came out.
Long ago, I know.
Half a century.
And they did a good job finding people like Father Brennan. Like, they did a good job finding actors that were...
Looked kind of like the original actors. Like, Father Brennan looked like the original Father Brennan in the first one.
Yeah, I'd be convinced that, like, siblings or son or something like that.
That could be. You never know. I don't know.
So this movie got a 70% on Rotten Tomatoes, 6.8 out of 10 on IMDb, and then it's got a 3 on, like, Google reviews, which I thought this was a pretty good movie. The budget was $30 million.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was very well done. Just the whole... it's something a little different, too, just given the backstory of, like, Damien, because it kind of like the Omen, the original Omen was kind of just like, okay, but, they allude to, like, he was the spawn of the devil, and this is how he kind of got here, but it gives, like, a backstory to that, like, what the church was actually doing, because it never really said the church was doing it in the first one. They kind of, like, hinted at it, which I think at that time you really couldn't say a lot of that stuff.
That's what I was just going to say. I think given the time period that it came out, you can't really do stuff like that.
Yeah.
Coming out in 2024 is totally different than, what did it come out, in the 70s?
76, I think it came out. So almost, it was 48 years ago.
That's a totally different culture than it is now. But, yeah, it's funny to me that this came out pretty much the same weekend as Immaculate, because it's the same kind of concept of, like, making women give birth to something against their will that's going to help the church, but not help the, like, going to basically ruin the woman.
Right.
Ruin or kill the woman.
Yeah.
And they don't care because it's for the benefit of the church.
I know. It's kind of the same idea as Immaculate, just instead of being Jesus, it's the Antichrist. It's the polar opposite, but it's supposed to still do the same thing, like achieve, like, get rid of that secularism that everybody's starting to feel about the church and everything. So it is very similar. Yeah. But it's just, this is different, obviously, because it's about it's about tying the Omen, making a full story of the Omen, essentially. So.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good, like, jump scares in this, too. Like, not cheesy jump scares. Mm-hmm. There's, like, some well-done jump scares. Like that one in the beginning when she's in the bedroom with the curtains.
Oh, man, that was creepy. Oh. Yeah, it was actually kind of funny, but, like, she had her nun robe, I don't know what they call them, but, yeah, like, her nun dress hanging up, like, over...
Her nun outfit of the day.
Like, on this rack, and she's, like, this is Margaret. And,
yes, in her room.
Yeah, and she's like, I don't know if she just, like, woke up in the middle of the night, but it's creepy. And, like, the whole time it's, like, that you can see, like, it looks like a person standing there, but it's just a nun uniform. And, like, she's, like, keeps, like, just, like, looking at it, and then all of a sudden it's just, like, makes, like, a noise, and, like, there's, like, a woman inside of it, and it's just, like, oh, my God, like, no.
It reminds me of... in The Conjuring with the nun, when, like, the picture kind of comes to life, you're, like, looking at it, and you're like, I know that's going to become something.
Yeah,
you're looking at it, like, I know.
Yeah, it's like they were focusing on it, like, it's going to happen, but it just happens so quickly, and, like, when you least expect it,
yeah,
too.
And it's still scary when you see it, because you know something's going to come, but then when it still happens, you're still like, I know when that happened, I was like, ooh.
I know, that was creepy. And then there's this is going to be an iconic horror movie scene, too, but when there's a scene in the movie when... It was Margaret. She was witnessing a birth at the orphanage because they do that as well at the orphanage. They help mothers.
What are they called? Like unwed mothers.
Unwed mothers. That's like an old school thing that the nunneries did. And there was this woman there giving birth, and Margaret was like watching it, and she's like screaming bloody murder and stuff. But then Margaret starts to have one of her visions again. But is it a vision? Well, I think it is, because I think she ends up passing out, and she sees, like, so it shows it, too. It's pretty...
I couldn't believe it showed it.
I couldn't believe it showed it, either. I mean, it was a pretty long scene, too, but, like, the woman, like, she's legs are spread and everything, she's pushing the baby out, but all of a sudden this, like, devil hand comes out, and... of the vagina, and you see everything. I mean, they didn't hold back on it, which I was like, what the fuck? I've never seen something like that. And it just, like, comes right out, and it's, like, it's not, like, it's CGI, but it's very well done.
It's very well done. It looks like an actual hand coming out.
Oh, man, it was so freaky. I was like, wow, I've never seen something like that done before.
I know. And seeing it in theaters, I was like, surely they're not going to show the birth. Like, surely they're not going to show all that. And, like, they do a good job of, like, kind of alluding away from, like, like the actual like birth process. Like they kind of show it, but they don't fully show. It's not like the birth video they show you in like health class.
Yeah, it's not like that. No,
it's like it's tastefully done, I guess, as much as it can be.
Sure.
But definitely, yeah, I was watching that and I was like, oh, they're not going to show it. They're not going to show it. And then just a hand comes out.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
I was not expecting that. It was just like, and Margaret like immediately she's like starts passes out, but freaks out and passes out, and then she again like wakes up with no memory.
Right, and then the cardinal just gaslights the shit out of her and was like, oh yeah, a lot of people pass out when they see births. And she's just like, no, I saw a hand come out of that thing.
I'm pretty sure I just saw like a demon hand.
Like, are you sure that wasn't a demon she was birthing, just coming right out of her?
Oh my god, yeah, it was pretty wild.
And it's one of those movies too, for sure, where it's like you're watching it and you're just so confused. Like I remember watching it and I was so confused, and then it all makes sense at the end, but it's kind of like you're kind of on the edge the whole movie. You're like, what do you mean? Like, this doesn't make sense. And like it crossed my mind at one point. Like I thought in the very beginning when we were introduced to Margaret, I'm like, oh, so she's Damien's mom then? That's the first thing I thought of, and then shit just started to kind of go weird, and I'm like, I'm so confused right now, because even like when she goes out to the disco, right, and she's like, kind of like talking to that guy or whatever, there's one scene where she sees him on the street, and she's like, oh hey, like trying to chase him down and be like, hey, how you been, whatever, and try to get some insight into that night because her roommate didn't give her anything. Mm-hmm. And the guy's just running from her, and he's like, like getting all weird and running away.
Yeah, he was like really like nervous.
Yeah, like, more than like one night stand vibes. Very just like, like, what is hhappening? So she finally catches up to him, and he's kind of just saying like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know, I'm sorry, like being elusive. Yeah. And then next thing you know, a bus goes by and hits him. Yeah. And he's pinned up against. This part's pretty gnarly too. He's pinned up against a wall like this. About this part. And the car is like right at his midsection. Yes. And she's like, kind of has a vision, kind of not, and she's like hugging him, and like in her head she's hugging him, and it's like kind of romantic and all that. And then it cuts to real life, and she's just holding his torso like this.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I don't know if she was in, like, I don't think she was just thinking. I don't know if she was having a vision. She was, like, freaking out.
Maybe it was, like, in and out of a vision or, like, adrenaline or something.
I think it was just, she was like, oh, you're going to be okay. That's what she kept saying. Like, you're going to be okay. She's, like, hugging him and holding him. Like, she's like, call 911, call 911. And she's like, okay, hang on, I'm going to help you and, like, try to move you. And she just, like, basically rips him in half.
Yeah. Because he was still alive because his object was probably, holding everything together, like his blood and everything. Yeah. It was holding it all in. Yes. And then she hugged him and basically just tore him away.
I know. And the people, too, that were standing around.
So I was going to say, this one woman literally was just like, ah!
It was actually kind of funny because she's, like, holding him, and she's like, oh, no. Oh, no. And she's, like, realizes, like, wait a minute. He's like in two pieces right now.
I'm just holding a torso.
It was kind of funny. It was like, she's like, no.
I agree. I think that was like a little bit of like comedic relief too. Because you're kind of just like,
this is outrageous. Like, she's just holding his upper half of his body.
But then at the same time, you're so confused because you're like, what the hell? Why did he run away from her like that? What happened that night?
And then he like mimics, like, then you go like, she flashes back to that night when she's with Father Brennan and the other priest, and they're like discovering that she's part of this whole conspiracy thing, and she's like, he was worded something to her like, look for the mark, and that's how she remembered.
Yeah, you're right.
She remembered him wording that to him, and she's like, look at my head, like look for it, and they find it on her head.
You're right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, I did. I forgot about that part. It's a long movie too. It's like a good 2.5 hour movie.
Yeah, and it's a lot. I feel like a lot of times with these religious movies, there's a lot. I don't know, because they talk in kind of like a more sophisticated, older language too. There's a lot to pick up on, and there's a lot to. I would definitely watch it again, maybe to get a second.
Oh yeah, you definitely. It's long too, so you definitely probably going to miss a few things if you're not giving it, your full attention.
The guy too from the disco or whatever, he was sweet, but he ended up being there that night when she was getting raped by the demon thing. He was there in the crowd.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, remember he was like crying. He was in the corner. They brought him with him. He was like crying like this, and that's why he said, "I'm so sorry." Dead. No, this was before the night that they went to the disco and she passed out. They made him be a part of it.
Oh, when they impregnated her.
Yes.
Oh, okay, I got you. All right, yeah, no, I do remember that.
No, not when she gave birth. No, not at that part. When she had the pass out or whatever, they made him go with, which I don't know why he came with or what.
They probably told him, like, you're doing this for the betterment of humanity, like completely brainwashing him. Yeah, or that too. It could be a threat like that. No offense, but the church has been known to,
threaten one or two.
Yeah.
So what do you think about this movie?
I really liked it. I thought it was very well done, filmed very nice. just, yeah, I mean, it was overall, I think it was done well. Again, on the longer side, so if, you know, you really got to pay attention to some things because it does take a while, but it's worth it, you know.
Yeah, it does kind of take a little bit to get going.
Yeah, it is kind of like a slow burn at first, you know, I will say that. It's nothing like crazy, which is nice, too, because then it kind of builds the suspense for everything.
Which Immaculate was, too, which is why they're kind of so similar, because it starts out as like, okay, everything's kind of okay, like, it's weird
Yeah,
here,
it's just kind of, yeah, you're kind of like, it's nothing, I mean, you know something bad's going to happen, that's the whole point of the movie, but... You know, it's not like immediately like, oh wow, you know, that's crazy.
Which one did you like better, this one or Immaculate?
I like both of them. I probably like this one because it ties in with the Omen a little bit more, and it's just kind of cool, like how like names and stuff like that from like the first, you know, the original Omen are like mentioned and brought up and like places and everything like that, and so it was kind of like a nostalgic kind of thing for me because I do love the original Omen. I think it's a great film, and this one I definitely was like right up there with it.
Yeah,
and it did pretty well too. So
it did pretty well.
I think
people
it
made
like
18 million opening weekend or something.
That's not bad.
Which I was telling Nick when we went to go see it too. I thought it was funny that not only did it come out on Easter weekend, but one of the movie poster for it was just like how self-aware it was. It was literally like a basket of Easter eggs, and they were all like black Easter eggs, and one of them had the 666 on it. And I'm like, that's a bold move to be.
That really is.
Basically an anti-Christian movie and come out on Easter weekend is a bold move.
I know, it really is. It's like, well, it's like what that whole, I remember back like when the remake of Black Christmas came out on Christmas Day, everyone was throwing a huge fit of it because it's like, oh, that's a terrible, you know.
Oh my God.
And it's like, you know.
Which the remake of Black Christmas sucks, but that's iconic to come out on Christmas Day.
Yeah, I remember it being in theaters and I wanted my mom to take me to go see it because I was only like 10, you know, when it came out, so. And she's like, no, absolutely not. That is sacrilegious.
Yeah, if you were 10, I must have been like 7 or 8, so I probably couldn't have went to see it. But no, I like this movie. I was thinking before we started this that I do like it better than Immaculate. I will say I want to give Sydney Sweeney props, which we did when we did the Immaculate review, but her acting was just like
she did
top tier.
An amazing job acting.
She should get an Emmy or whatever it is, Oscar.
Yeah.
She should definitely be recognized for that. But this one, I would say I like more for, like the nostalgia of the Omen, like you were saying, and I just think there's more scares in this one. I think there was more, like, unsettling scenes. Like, even the birth scene alone. Like, Immaculate didn't have anything like that.
Yeah, nothing that, like, outrageous.
No. It wasn't that gory, really, Immaculate.
No.
Wasn't that unsettling.
But it definitely, like, the thing I liked about Immaculate is it kind of reminded me of, like, I don't know, like one of those older Italian films.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of like a nunsploitation movie from, like, the 80s, but not obviously as, like, sexual as they were and stuff like that. And...
Yeah, definitely it was definitely like an older, well, it said it drew inspiration from like, what's his name, Giallo films, things like that.
Yeah, that's what it kind of reminded me of, like Dario Argento vibes and stuff, but this one, like, the first Omen, I just think that's very well done too.
I think it was very well done.
It gives me more, I guess really not that like Italian style of filming. I don't know. It's just weird how the styles of filming, I think, are a little different. I
agree. I think it was probably more focused on like being scary and all that, which I think it was definitely, I don't know, I guess it would be hard for the time being. I think it's definitely scarier than the original Omen, but I guess seeing the Omen in the 70s and not seeing anything like that really a lot, it probably would have been scarier.
Sure, yeah.
But this one's definitely scarier than the first Omen. Like, they definitely stepped their game up a lot, but still paying respect to the older Omen.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Not, like, losing sight of its heritage, essentially.
Yeah, and it's just one of those movies you just gotta watch and just kind of make your own opinion of, you know.
People are saying it's the best horror movie of the year. Would you agree with that?
I would say so, yeah. I liked it. I think it's better than Immaculate. You know, in my opinion, I liked it better than Immaculate. And
did you like it better than Late Night with the Devil?
Yeah, I did because, like, Late Night with the Devil, that's its own thing, you know, because it's very unique. You know, it's like not lost footage. Well, it is like lost footage.
Yeah, it's lost footage.
But not like, you know, the Blair Witch Way or like Great Encounters or Hell House or something like that. That's a completely different style.
It's unique, yeah.
So it's cool in its own like way. You know, I like that in its own way. I like this because of, you know, its own way as well.
I would say that this is probably the best horror movie I've seen this year.
Yeah, I would definitely say so.
Until Terrifier 3 comes out in November, and then that'll probably be my new favorite. But for right now, this is definitely, out of all the ones I've seen this year, I'd say this is probably the most well done and my favorite.
No, I definitely think this is well done, and there's a bunch of other other horror movies coming out this year that we're looking forward to. Like there's going to be the Nosferatu remake.
M. Night Shyamalan's daughter is doing something.
Yep, I think it's called The Watch or something like that.
With the girl from It Follows.
No, that's the one with that's Asgard. Osgood Perkins, the guy that did The Black Coat's Daughter and The Pretty Thing in the Wall.
Yeah, there's a lot of...
that one looks really good, too. That's got Nick Cage in it as well, so it's probably going to be pretty good.
There's a lot of horror movies coming out this year, so if you guys like our movie reviews, let us know.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fun to do them. It gives us like a little...
Yeah,
I feel like I actually like understood the movie when we do these, and I go over them, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, it was a good movie. I had like a newfound appreciation for them almost.
Sure.
You know?
No, yeah, and it kind of like, we talk about it, and it's like, oh, yeah, that makes sense now, because we've got ideas.
Like, and when I first saw it, I was like, it's hard that they're the offspring and they're getting pregnant.
I know, I didn't get that at first either. I'm like, okay, maybe that's just like the rule, for it to work. I don't know. I'm like, that's like really bizarre that that's got to happen, but... I
wouldn't go in the movie like fully knowing... or expecting to understand it all without, like, Googling it after, for sure.
Yeah, there's going to be, like I said, unless you, like, are a diehard Omen fan and, like, are going to give this movie, like, 110% of your attention and, like, know the whole backstory to the Omen and everything, then...
I would watch the Omen before, though. We came home and watched it after we saw it.
Yeah,
I would definitely suggest watching it before.
Yes.
And then you can kind of be like, okay, this, and this.
I think, watching it, like, like a day before, like,
even a day after, because this would technically be a prequel. So I guess you could watch it after.
Yeah, you could do that as well. But I think you should watch the original first and then...
Yeah, always give credit to the original, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, you have anything else?
Nope.
Okay, well, until next week, guys.
Stay spooky.
Stay spooky.